Special thanks to our podcast sponsors, Brigitte and Bashar Kalai, Hallie Vanderheider, and Sippy and AJ Karana.
At Crime Stoppers of Houston, we believe in safety for all, and to achieve that, it's necessary to have balanced conversations where all are represented. Here's where we come together to do just that. Welcome to The Balanced Voice. Today, we're joined by our chairman, Jeff Faden, who is going to give us a special discussion about today's topic. Jeff, thank you so much for being with us.
Happy to be here, Rania.
So, Jeff, we were presented with the complicated story of sharing Offia Siddiqui's case, and she's currently being held in Texas. Dawood Ghaznavi actually came from Pakistan, did a round of interviews here in Houston, with just the hope of sharing Siddiqui's story. His goal is obviously to get her sent back to Pakistan. And we weren't sure, one of FBI's most wanted individuals called Lady Al-Qaeda, whether or not this story should be told. But ultimately, we chose to have him come and be a guest on the Balanced Voice podcast. We're about to share his interview, but can you talk to us a little bit about why that decision was made and what your thoughts were on it?
Certainly, Ronnie. Just a little bit of background. In addition to being the board chair of Crime Stoppers of Houston, I am a white-collar defense lawyer here in Houston, have been doing that for about 9 years now. But I think more importantly, prior to that, I spent 16 years here in Houston as a state and federal prosecutor. And during my federal prosecution career, a substantial portion of that I spent focusing on counterterrorism and counter-espionage issues for the Department of Justice. So I think I might have some insight into some of the issues that may cause some people some concern.
Yeah, and Crime Stoppers as an organization does look at terrorism, counterterrorism, and as I said, we share difficult stories. So with that, we're going to pause and welcome Dawood to the podcast. Again, he came straight from Pakistan and to the Crime Stoppers of Houston building. And Crime Stoppers, of course, makes no claim one way or the other. We're not standing for or against Lady Al-Qaeda, FBI's most wanted, Aafia. We are certainly listening to the story and inviting people to do some research and find out more information. So with that, we'll pause and we'll circle back with some closing comments. Thank you again, Jeff.
Thank you.
Welcome to the Balanced Voice podcast. We have a really special edition today. We are here with Barrister Dawood Ghaznavi, a Supreme Court attorney from Pakistan. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks very much.
So Dawood is the author of Aafia Unheard, Uncovering the Personal and Legal Mysteries Surrounding FBI's Most Wanted Woman. It's an international Amazon bestseller. You can get it at Amazon. The story he's about to share with us and the interesting questions we're going to be asking about people and things that become collateral damage of war are really compelling. We thought it was an important story to bring to you guys today, and no one better to bring it.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so talk to us first of all, share with us a little bit about who you are, your background, and then why you started covering Dr. Aafia's story.
Well, first of all, I really thank you for inviting me here and discussing something really controversial as per American standards, but I'm really, really thankful for that. Secondly, I grew up in Pakistan, but half of my childhood was in America, and then afterward we moved back to Pakistan. And when I was 17 or 18, I moved to England for my high school education. Then I did my college in England, and then I did my university in England. Then I qualified to be a lawyer in England. Then I moved back to Pakistan. And I was the youngest ever in Pakistan to appear in the Supreme Court. It was very, at that time, it was like a judicial activism was going in Pakistan. So I got my space on those causes which were of public importance. So I got the attention, and then I contested the election from my city. And then I moved back to my court stuff again, and I took some cases which were not really impossible for people to take on. And I got successful in those cases. So this is how I got into many controversial cases as well. people who just dump those files. I try to dig them out and try to find out that what happened to them, why people are not more interested in them anymore. So some of the cases people use them politically. Some of the cases people have tried their best and they find no solution. So I try to dig them out and try to find out, So with these kind of cases, as per law, she's a Pakistani citizen. And by Vienna Convention and even with the Pakistani Constitution, we have the responsibility to protect their fundamental rights. So for me, it's a case of public importance. So these kind of prisoners who are detained not only in America, in Sri Lanka, Thailand, Saudi Arabia, all those countries, I pick up those cases because these people have been detained in those countries forever.
Nobody speaking up for them.
Actually, those countries like Thailand, Sri Lanka, they get money from United Nations to keep those prisoners. For them, it's a good business to keep those prisoners because they get money to take care of them as they're under Geneva Convention kind of things. So in Pakistan, because of less resources, and the second thing is that we don't really too much bother because of the crime charges sometimes they have. So Pakistan are not really interested to getting back those people. But the recent government, they are doing some things to get back some people. And we got some people back from Saudi Arabia as well. And because of the relation, it always depends on the relation between the countries. But from Thailand and from Sri Lanka, it's very miserable the way the people are over there.
So Dr. Aafia Siddiqui's story is really unbelievable. This book was very compelling to read, and share with us a little bit about her story, her background. She's noted as one of FBI's most wanted women.
Yes.
And the charges against her were substantial.
Yes. Actually, Aafia's story is something which I got to know in detail in 2018. In 2008, when I left Oxford Brookes University and I was going for my law school, at that time she was being found in Afghanistan. And when I was leaving my law school, she was having her trial. So I did witness her trial from news headlines, but I never read about the trial until 2018. I used to come to America a lot for one of my other overseas voting rights case. And in Houston, I used to travel a lot and used to meet Pakistani community here. And everybody, just used to talk about Aafia. And they used to ask me, why don't you pick up this case again in Pakistan? Because people have tried, people have used her name everywhere. So why don't you come up with this case in Pakistan? So I pick up her case and file a suit in the Supreme Court of Pakistan with, directing the government of Pakistan to repatriate her, because this was one of the judgment where the government had the responsibility to repatriate his citizens. So I didn't get a good result in the Supreme Court, and the case got dismissed. Then afterwards, the kind of reaction people showed me, it was just phenomenal, the way people start sending me blessings. And there was like over 25,000 people who connected me through different sources that this is the thing you're doing and this is amazing. I just thought about that something which has been done for 18 years ago is still relevant.
Because she was arrested 18 years ago?
No, she was disappeared in 2003 from Pakistan.
Okay.
I'll tell you this story,
Yes.
what actually happened. So I came to America and I found that people have so much compelling voices for her release or for her repatriation kind of thing. So let me see what the case talks about. Because when you go on the internet and Wikipedia, you find her the biggest monster.
I was reading about her and thinking, my gosh, was she the first female Al-Qaeda operative?
Yeah.
That's a big deal.
Yes.
And no wonder she's one of FBI's most wanted. But then I
Yes.
read your book and we read about her what actually happened to her, and there's a lot of questions.
Exactly. So what actually happened was I came to American Southern District Court and got the whole court case files. Just try to understand what actually the case is, because you have the both sides of the narrative who are actually exploiting her position. Mm-hmm. One of the side is using her name as a propaganda against the Muslim world, and one of the side, they are using her name to exploit extremism and at the same time use her name to get more recruits in the Muslim world for the terrorist organizations, which is one of the reasons I feel that to counter terrorism, such names should be mentioned completely and should be said completely what are these people. So basically, Aafia is in 1990, I think so 1990, she came to University of Houston to study medicine. And from here, she got transferred to MIT, where she studied biology. And from there, she went to Brandeis University to do her master's in neuroscience and then PhD in neuroscience as well, where Noam Chomsky was one of her tutor, and Dr. Sakudo, one of the best names in psychology and kind of stuff. During that time, it was a very crucial time. What was happening in 1990s in Europe was Bosnian War. And at the same time, the Chechen War and the Russian invasion in Afghanistan was just been wrapping up. So all those organizations in America were under the American law, were operating in America, and they were doing fundraising and all those humanitarian aid things in America for those Muslims in Europe, in Bosnia, and these kind of stuff. So she was one of the organizations in her school was called a Muslim Foundation kind of organization. So she was part of those organizations, and she was a very good outspoken speaker to get all those fundraising and these kind of stuff. So when 9/11 happened in 2001, and all those organizations and all those groups were under surveillance. And as per, whatever the presidential executive order was at that time, that whoever you find suspicious, just get them, without any kind of, I don't remember the name of that executive order, but under that order, one thing was really paramount, and that was that nobody can question you for how long you're going to detain these people. But then afterward, the Supreme Court intervened. But Aafia, in 2002, she finished her PhD. And during that time, one time, the FBI came and questioned her husband. Not her husband.
In Pakistan or
in America?
In America,
in
okay.
Boston.
In Boston.
Yes, in 2002, something like that. So at that time, she was at home as well. So they both were being interviewed by FBI. And they were being asked that the FBI wants to interview them again. This was the thing, the FBI actually told them. Then afterwards, she moved back to Pakistan because her father was dying and she had to be there. She went to Pakistan. And in 2003, in March, maybe 18th of March in 2003, there was like a high alert from FBI that Aafia is wanted to be questioned. So this is how this whole scenario of most wanted woman comes in, because she was only required to be interviewed. She was never been required to be asked for her terrorism activities. No, she was wanted to be interviewed. So there are two narratives for this thing. So on the same month, on the 25th of March, I think in Pakistan, because Pakistan was part of this secret program called Extraordinary Rendition Program, where Pakistan were been handing over those people to Americans without getting charged them just for interrogation. And those people were being sent to different secret prisons around the Muslim world, where they were, even in Europe, there were a lot of secret prisons where they used to interrogate those people. So this was just like one of the programs. I think what happened was on 25th of March, she got panicked that she's going to be picked up. So she asked her mother that she's going to her uncle's house in Pindi. And she was in she was in Karachi.
Okay.
So she took her 3 kids along with her, and she went to the railway station or airport. Nobody knows about it.
Okay.
From that day on, she just disappeared with her 3 children. From that on 2003. Very few people at that time, one of the good Pakistani media house, they did mention that, some people in certain dressing, they picked her up and she just got disappeared. So for the next 5 years, her kids and herself was disappeared.
And her husband?
Her husband
Was
She got divorced in 2002.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So she just disappeared from Pakistan. So for the next 2-3 years, because of the pressure at that time of the government, the family didn't raise any voice. So in 2006, there was one journalist in England that's called Yvonne Ridley, kind of journalist name. She was an investigating journalist, and she was the person who was being under the Taliban imprisonment during her big journalism and she converted, and then she became a Muslim. Some Muslim people, as per what I saw from different information, they came to Yvonne and they explained her that there is a lady, prisoner 650, in Bagram prison, and she get very much tortured, these kind of stuff. Then she start investigating the case, that what is happening, where this lady is being. Because if you remember at that time, Dianne Feinstein was the person who actually exposed all these secret prison things, the Washington Post and everything. So it was the first time ever that America actually admit that they do have secret prisons. And the Obama administration actually then, stopped doing all those stuff. And then Yvonne, in 2008, in her mind and in her investigation, she was convinced that Aafia is in Bagram, in American secret prison. So the current Prime Minister of Pakistan, Imran Khan, at that time, he was in opposition. She rang him and explained him, and he was very anti-war on terror at that time, the Prime Minister, and he was raising the voice against this extraordinary rendition programs and everything. She explained him about this lady, and he actually admit that her family did came to him in 2003, but they were so much under pressure that they couldn't, make that voice heard in Pakistan because of all dictatorship was going on in Pakistan. So they had made a sort of a press conference in Islamabad in 2008 and asking the people of Pakistan, the government of Pakistan, and plus the Americans, that where this lady is, who is prisoner 650. If that's not Aafia, then who is that person? So there was a response from Bagram that this lady is not Aafia. We used to have one lady in 2000 until 2006, but afterwards that person was gone, that female person, but that was not Aafia. But after 10 days of this press conference, there was an incident happened in Ghaznavi, Afghanistan, which is so interesting, that a lady is found outside Ghaznavi's governor's compound, along with a boy, a little 5 or 6 years old or 11 years old boy. And she had a bag in her hand, which is full of chemical weapons and full of these maps of New York and Brooklyn bridges to destroy all those things. And the Afghan police have actually arrested her and took her to the police station. And over there, the governor of Ghaznavi contacted the American officials to come and interview her, whatever they want to do. The American actually wanted to take that lady, but the Afghan government, especially Hamid Karzai, they were never been interested to hand over to the Americans that person, but they gave the permission to interview her. So the Americans went to interview her, and what happened at that time, what the American version came up, which goes to the case, was that this lady, just picked up one of the American official, like one of the sergeants, not the sergeant, it was called chief warrant officer's gun, M4 gun, and she just hold it right next to them to 6 American officials. In fact, she got shot from M6 gun 2 times in her stomach, and she was being taken to. From there, the American actually holded her. And the Afghan intelligence people who were with Americans, they actually asked them, where are you taking this woman? Because you are not allowed to take this person. They said that this lady is dying, so we need to get her treated. So they took her to Bagram Hospital. This is where they got her surgery done. And she was there for 2 weeks. And from there, she was being rendited to America to face.
And that is Dr. Aafia.
That is Dr. Aafia Siddiqui. And
so her 11-year-old was with her.
The boy, yes. What happened was that when Aafia was being asked about the boy, she didn't knew that who this boy is, because she said, I have never seen this boy before.
Okay.
Yeah, because she was suffering from PTSD at that time and all those delusion disorder and these kind of stuff.
So she had already started suffering from the mental health breakdown.
Yes, mental health breakdown.
Okay.
When she appeared before the court in New York Southern District Court, the judge actually saw her on the wheelchair, and she had her mental illnesses. At the same time, she had a huge menstruation problem, all the bleeding going on in her body and everything. When the judge actually looked at her, he actually said, "This is miserable, the way you are treating this woman. I mean, the way you have presented that person." So he ordered the psychological test and at the same time, all the medical tests. So when the test came up for the psychological test, they found her not mentally fit for the trial because of having many mental illnesses. So then they sent her to Coswell Medical Center, where she was being diagnosed with many different mental illnesses. And at the same time, her mental assessment test and all those tests to find her being competent for the trial started over there. So for the next 1 year, from 2008 to 2009, she was in Carswell getting all those treatments and at the same time going through all those assessments by the prosecution psychiatrist team and the defense psychiatrist team. But the judge at the end decided her and found that she is mentally competent for the trial to have communication with her lawyers. I mean, he said there was one reference to one of the case of Lopez, if I don't remember. From that case, it was been said that if you have a minor problems with your mental illnesses, it is fine. You are mentally fit for the trial. But there's a huge controversy on that issue as well, which according to Aafia's lawyer, Charles Swift, if you know, he's in Dallas.
Yes.
He's one
Very
of the leading
well
lawyers.
known. Very well known.
And he was one of his
her lawyers.
But if you read through the court case files and what has actually happened between her connection with her lawyer, you will see there was no communication. There was a huge communication gap.
Yeah.
She couldn't communicate. I mean, think about a person who's been diagnosed as delusional disorder. How can that person is going to trust someone?
Yeah.
She's going to see everybody is against her.
Right.
So this was the situation which was going on. So what actually happened was that the biggest problem which happened in the case was that Aafia was not communicating because she was having a mental illness problem. Second thing, which was the most relevant thing, was that she decided to testify.
Yeah.
This really messed up the case.
Based on your book, yes.
Yes, this is where she, being as a lawyer, I understand even a single line in the court, how it damaged your case.
Yes.
And even in the criminal matters. So I think so the main issue came up when she decided to testify.
But I'm reading from your book. So, 7 counts. Count 1, attempted murder of United States national. The 4-person found her guilty, but said it lacked premeditation. Count 2, attempted murder of United States officers' employees. She's found guilty. They asked, was there premeditation? No. Count 3, armed assault of a United States officer and employee. Guilty. Count 4, using and carrying a firearm during and a retaliation of a crime. Guilty. Assault of United States officer's employee. Assault of interpreter. And it goes on and on and on. But, it's 7 counts. But what's so interesting is the background seems to be lacking. So I think the story you're saying, or the incident of her being found with that bag, is concerning. But it didn't seem like she preemptively attacked anybody. It seems like she was attacked, there was a response, but that escalated into something huge.
Well, what fascinated me about this story and the way I picked up this case to that point and, write this book is to tell the Americans the way we have been, being as a Pakistani, we have been really unfairly treated because of this case. During her missing years, the way you portray her, the way, the pseudonyms were being given to her, that like Lady Al-Qaeda Fixer, Lady Taliban, with all those things you came up with her and you tried to implicate her into different sort of Al-Qaeda's conspiracy. But at the end of the day, in the court, you actually mentioned that we are not even interested that whether she's part of Al-Qaeda or not. That was really astonishing fact for me, that you portray somebody as one of the most dangerous women, but in the court, you have not put some sort of, charges against her. And the most interesting thing is that with that bag, in your federal criminal charges, you do have a charge of providing material support. The bag is a material. So providing material support is one of the terrorist offenses as well. So why don't you charge her with that bag as well? You've never been interested to find out where the bag comes up. So that's mean the bag has been used to show to the judge that you had the intention to hurt the Americans.
Right.
Because that's what the bag says.
Exactly.
That's what the documents have been saying. So that document was being used as an evidence to show that somebody is dangerous enough to hurt the Americans and the intention they try to show.
Is that why her lawyers requested a sentence of 12 years, or is that
I think
different?
so. The reason why the lawyer asked for 12 years was when she testified.
Lawyer.
Yes,
Okay.
when she testified,
She heard
they
her own
found
case.
that she
Yeah.
has confessed for the bag.
Yeah.
They found that she had made a lot of mistakes.
Yes.
And they were completely against that. So they had no choice. At that, I met Charles 2-3 times, and he went to Pakistan with me as well. When we talked about this issue, he said this is one of the cases he really feels bad even today, because she had no mental capacity to defend herself. Who doesn't want to cooperate with her lawyer when she find out that these persons are in better
Yes,
interest of
right.
her? So this is where she made a mistake. And this is where Charles actually said that he had no choice just to give the judge, if she has admitted something, now let's go for something lesser.
But it's so interesting, and this is part of the reason why we were talking about it, because one, she's being held in Dallas.
Yes.
It's costing the state millions, maybe
Yes.
up to $4 million a year to hold her. She seems like she was a brilliant woman. Clearly, there was a mental health breakdown. She did have the bag. There was question of intent to commit crimes against America.
Yes.
But where she is now seems to be in this limbo. And she's being used on the one hand as a narrative for, you called it, what did you say, collateral damage of war and terror.
Yes.
So we just want to ask, what's the end game with Dr. Siddiqui? Does she need to be extradited back to Pakistan? Is that the solution? Are we saying she's innocent of all wrongdoing? Do we need the community to get involved to read more about this? What is your desired end game for her?
When I read her trial, and when I read all those facts which I am trying to explain to you, I see this peace talks and this peace agreement with the Taliban and the things they're trying to wrap up things. One of the things which they find to talk with the Taliban, to have an agreement with the Taliban, is that if you don't give sanctuaries or if you don't give any amnesty to any terrorist organizations in Afghanistan during your time period in the future, then we can have a talk with you guys, with the Taliban. When I see her case, I have come to the point and I have come to the conclusion that her connection hasn't been established yet with the Al-Qaeda.
Okay.
And the second thing I see is that she's not a threat to American interest, even in America or around the globe, because that person is suffering from mental illnesses. And at the same time, she is in isolation from the last 15-20 years. She cannot be part of any sort of conspiracies. And the third thing which I find is that to counter the terrorism, you have to stop all those organizations who are using her name, who are using her detention being in America to be exploitation in the Muslim world, that look, your own Muslim governments, they are handing over your sisters to America. And this is how they exploit that detention even today.
Because she's never been found to be guilty of, she's not a terrorist. She hasn't been named a terrorist. She's not been found guilty of this.
I mean, there was one case that's called Uzair Paracha's case. It was like a Baltimore gasoline conspiracy case. In that case, they tried to implicate her, but she was an unindicted conspirator in the case. And then there was one very popular case which was being investigated by the UN, one of the UN team. It was in Liberia, that she is, blood diamond fixer for Al-Qaeda. It was a very high profile matter. But when it came to American FBI, they actually found the witnesses not credible. And they took off from that case. They took off from Uzair Paracha's case. And Uzair Paracha's case itself is mistrial after 15 years. And then in the court, they were not interested that whether Aafia is an Al-Qaeda operator or not. And as a lawyer, you can see that the judge has the right to see the classified documents along with her lawyers, which they did. Even then, the judge just speculated at the end that, maybe she gone to Afghanistan just because she was looking for her second husband. Maybe she has gone to Afghanistan just because she wanted to help the Taliban. Everywhere is a speculation. So why I have been treated unfairly as a Pakistani just because of her name? let's set the course again. Let's see what is the best for both of the countries out of this case. I mean, you are talking with the Taliban. They're the deadliest people. You left 5,000 people on the name of peace. I mean, what guarantee do you have that these people are not going to go back on the battlefield? You have no guarantees. So with this person, she is nothing in front of them. So why not her? Because being as a Pakistani, I feel that this is very, very ignored matter.
Yeah.
I mean, you portray her in New York Times, you portray her everything in every newspaper, whatever you have, as an operator. But where do you stand now? I mean, I wrote an article in Atlantic Council about her, and they invited us last week to come and speak in Atlantic Council about her case. Yes, there are opposition voices, but nobody has questioned the material I have provided. Nobody has questioned the credibility of it. So I would say that just because she is being under suspect and speculation doesn't mean that somebody is being involved. So that's my point in this case.
And I think it's important too that, you know, the community has a powerful role to play when they understand what's going on. And we're not claiming guilt or innocence, but we can say we need to make sure that the criminal justice system is operating the way that it's intended to, and that everybody has a voice and a right to protection under the law, especially in the U.S. And to think that this woman's here, you know, not that it's just costing millions of dollars, up to $4 million a year for the state of Texas to hold her, but the fact that she's away from her children, she's mentally unstable, and her story's being used to create division in other parts of the world. There's more to be looked at here.
Well, see, from that side, there was a time when her name was being used as a propaganda against, you know, mostly, I mean, like being as a Muslim, I felt this case come within the ambit of Islamophobia. This is how I see this case during that period. I mean, think about, we were in England and we were going to best schools in England, but at the same time, we were being seen people of suspect just because of her, that she is from MIT. She could be part of all those things. What about these kids? They can be part of all those things. We have suffered that thing during that time. But then afterwards, she was being picked, after her trial, then she was being picked up by those organizations, which are still using her for a decade. So what benefit we had out of 18 years out of this person keeping her in American detention? I don't see any benefit. If she's like a deterrence, if she's like a preemptive sort of counterterrorism strategy, that's not going to work enough, because now she's of no use of anybody.
Your work so far has been incredible. Everybody should get the book. It's an incredible read. Amazon, international bestseller. Barrister Dawood.
Yeah.
I've called you every name.
Okay.
We thank you so much for being with us. How can people be following you and what you're doing?
Well, and on following me, well, that's a good question.
We can tag it or link it if you want to provide it up. Okay, perfect.
Yes.
We will provide it. We thank you so very much. Continue the great work you're doing, and we hope to see you back in Houston very shortly.
Thank you very much.
So, Jeff, we just listened to Dawood share a really compelling story about this woman, Aafia Siddiqui. One of the questions I really wanted to clarify was, what does it mean for Texas residents that Aafia is held here? You know, he made a lot of claims about the cost of this, up to $4 million annually, funds spent. But who's spending that money? Where's that money coming from?
Well, Rania, I think you have to understand that many people, if you're not somehow involved in the criminal justice system, particularly on the federal criminal justice system, sometimes the lines get blurred between a state prosecution and a federal prosecution. The reality is that Ms. Aafia is being held in a Bureau of Prisons facility, which is a federal facility, and the cost of that's going to be borne by the taxpayers of the U.S. Across the board. So it's not a state issue. There are federal Bureau of Prisons facilities all around the country. There are several in Texas, including the one where she's being held. But because she's physically in Texas does not mean that the citizens of Texas are bearing the cost of her incarceration.
Okay. And you and I had a discussion about the notion of the war on terror, specifically after 9/11. And some people fold in sort of the Arabic communities, the Muslim communities into the war on terror. But you had an interesting comment about that, and I would say a correction in terms of philosophy and ideas. Can you share that with us?
Yeah, I can see from an outside perspective how someone may equate the war on terror as maybe being anti-Muslim. But I think if you step back and take a clear legal, lawyerly look at what happened and what happens in other types of investigations, prosecutors, agents, and things of that nature, you have to chase the facts and apply the law before you can prosecute someone. And not everyone that's done something wrong or committed a crime gets prosecuted for a variety of reasons. But I think you have to, in a counterterrorism world, address the threats. And the reality of, our post 9/11 world, we were dealing with threats from an enemy that was being launched at us from a Muslim country, that being Afghanistan. So if we go and prosecute the war on terror where the threat is, it's going to invariably involve incursions into a country that's predominantly Muslim. It doesn't mean that the war on terror is anti-Muslim. When drug trafficking prosecutors go out and traffic large-scale cocaine traffickers, sometimes it takes them to Mexico and Colombia. It's not anti-Hispanic. The overwhelming number of possessors and producers of child pornography in our country or in our federal prisons are white males, but it's not a war on white males. It's just where the facts take you.
I think that's such an important point. When we're dealing with these trials that deal with issues of terrorism and national security, how do the rules change?
Well, I think the basic rules of a federal criminal trial, whether it's a bank robbery or involving a terrorist charge, at the most basic level, they're the same. But the war on terror or a terrorism trial or a defendant who's charged with some terrorism offense, it oftentimes implicates additional rules and additional security measures. So, for example, if someone who is being prosecuted for a terrorism charge and part of the evidence set is intelligence that was derived from a non-traditional law enforcement source, i.e., whether it's the NSA or the CIA, there are special rules how that information, particularly the sources and methods, are gathered and used in a court of law. It's not like the defendant is getting an unfair trial and not having access to the information and discovery that their lawyer needs to defend them. But some things, for security reasons, are just kept from the public. So, for example, if there's a document or a recorded phone conversation that our intelligence agencies gathered by a particular source, and you don't want to disclose that source, that portion may be screened from, for example, the jury and the public eye, while the prosecutors and the judge and the defense lawyers know about it. A sufficient amount of information so they can defend their client without disclosing the intelligence method that was used to gather that information, so it doesn't hamper our national security efforts going forward to use those sources and methods.
And the very last question I'm going to ask you, I promise, is, as we dove into the story of Aafia Siddiqui, and it was one that was unknown to us, to be very honest with you, until it was brought to us by a Crime Stoppers community member who said, I'm not making any claims. I just think as an organization that talks about public safety, that looks into crime cases every day, this is a very interesting case. And this woman's being held in Dallas and has been held for some time. There was a lot of discussion about the brutal killing of an American missionary, Akela Mueller, and she was killed at the hands of ISIS. She'd been held captive for 18 months, personal sex slave, some said, to her captor, really in Syria and in the Middle East, in that part of the world, to do good. That was her whole intention of being there. There was discussion that her family had pleaded with President Obama to have the two women traded, so that Kayla would be sent back to the U.S. if the U.S. would just release Offia Siddiqui back overseas, and the U.S. chose not to make that trade, and ultimately Kayla was killed. Some people say this is all Offia Siddiqui's fault, that she knew about this. She was the mastermind. Yes, certainly she's being held, but she was the one orchestrating all of this. As a prisoner, could she be doing that? Orchestrating all this from where she's being held?
Well, I think that's a really, really complex question. And I think first and foremost, you have to acknowledge that, Miss Mueller's situation is certainly tragic, and you wish it never had occurred. But to make an assumption that a prisoner being held in a U.S. prison could orchestrate a killing internationally is really a stretch. First of all, any prisoner in a Federal Bureau of Prisons facility, you have limited communication options. And all phone calls from any federal facility are monitored, meaning they're recorded. Mm-hmm. And particularly for an individual charged with a crime of terrorism, you often have special administrative measures on their communication. So whereas a quote unquote run-of-the-mill drug trafficker or bank robber may have some more ability to communicate with friends and family on the outside, someone charged with a terrorist activity, just for that concern of communicating with fellow co-conspirators who may still be out and about in the world, they have even more restrictive communication options. Plus, you have to take it another step. And terrorism is a complicated thing, although sometimes we as a society try to simplify it. But you have a Pakistani national who's accused of being an al-Qaeda operative, at least maybe on the intelligence side. The odds of her being in communication with a Syrian-based ISIS group, there's not even unanimity among terrorist groups. Some of them hate each other more than they'll ever hate us. So the fact that a Pakistani female in America is controlling ISIS operations in Syria is really hard to imagine that being even possible.
And I think that's an interesting point. And one, part of the reason why we felt it was okay to share this story. Again, we don't make claims. We're not advocating for her release or anything. We're just allowing the story to be told because it's good for people to dig in and learn about these pieces of our history, learn about these cases. Again, she's been called FBI's most wanted woman. She's been called Lady Al-Qaeda. She is currently serving time in Dallas. And I think it's stemming from the actions of 9/11, which of course changed this country entirely. So Jeff Faden, our wonderful chairman, we thank you so much for taking the time to join us today on the Balanced Voice podcast and for sharing your insights with us.
Happy to do it. I think for any organization that involves itself with the criminal justice system, it's very, very important to have a broader, correct view of how they all interact, the different pieces connect together, and state versus federal and terrorism versus non-terrorism. The more we understand about the system, the better off we all are.
I couldn't say it better myself. We thank you again so very much. And to all of you, we will see you next time. Thank you again. Bye-bye, everybody.
If you missed anything from the show, check out the show notes at thebalancedvoicepodcast.com. This episode was edited and mixed by the team at Real News PR. Our executive producer is Sydney Zeiker. Our advising producer is Katie Meyer. Our Media and Quality Assurance Director is Tanya Cruz. And finally, our Creative Design Director is Elizabeth McChesney. To find out more information about Crime Stoppers of Houston or to get involved with our prevention programming, please visit us at crime-stoppers.org. You can find us on Instagram at The Balanced Voice Podcast, and you can find me online at The Runyon Report.